Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Backstory: I'd been working at the Grand Sapphire Hotel for over 3 years when they switched to a new chain called Regency Hotels. Along with a co-worker named Jessica, I was one of the few employees who went through the extensive training on Regency's rules and policies. Cast Brad, the front desk manager who had only been there for 6 months at this point. Mike, that's me, a generally nice guy, but I don't take crap from bullies or entitled jerks. Others to be introduced later. The story: it was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was scheduled for the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift. As I walked in, I noticed that both Carly and Emily, my morning shift co-workers, looked like they had been bawling their eyes out, makeup smeared and all. Brad, the manager, seemed furious. "What's going on?" I asked, concerned. Brad sighed heavily. "We've got a major jerk staying here. This guy is at the highest tier of Regency's rewards program. He's incredibly demanding, constantly wants free upgrades and freebies, and screams at the staff over the smallest things. Every department has been calling me, complaining about his behavior. Just before you arrived, he came to the desk and berated Carly and Emily until they were in tears." I felt bad for the young women. Fresh out of high school, they were both kind-hearted souls who lived to help others. They didn't deserve that kind of treatment. As Brad filled me in, I pulled up the rude guest information. A sly grin crept across my face when I read his details. "You didn't notice he's an employee at another Regency hotel?" Brad's brow furrowed. "Yeah, but what difference does that make?" "A huge one," I said, grabbing a copy of the employee discount policy. "It clearly states that when traveling on the discount, employees must be respectful at all times. Failure to comply can lead to the discount being suspended or revoked permanently, even termination." I found the number for the guy's hotel and dialed it, handing the phone to Brad. "You'll want to speak to the GM about this guy's appalling conduct." After the call, Brad had a wicked smile. "His GM is livid after I described everything this jackass has pulled. Said he'll deal with him personally." The phone at the front desk rang. I answered with my usual cheerful greeting. "Thank you for calling the Grand Sapphire Hotel. How may I direct your call?" "I need to speak with Mr. Arnold's room, please," a gruff voice demanded. Holding back a chuckle, I replied, "Certainly, sir. Have a great day." I transferred the call and turned to Brad. "Gee, I wonder who wanted to chat with our esteemed Mr. Arnold." Brad laughed. "The GM gave me his cell number, told me to call immediately if there are any other issues. Your revenge is taken care of. Now it's my turn." A mischievous glint shone in my eyes. Brad looked a bit worried. "Oh boy, what do you have planned?" With a devious grin, I picked up the phone again. "Hello, Regency Rewards customer service? Yes, I need to report someone abusing their rewards account while using an employee discount." The fun had just begun. Over the next hour, I systematically dismantled Mr. Arnold's elite status. After reporting him for the discount violation, I removed his rewards number from his stay, visited each department to spread the news and ensure he received no special treatment, and deactivated his access to the concierge lounge. Everywhere I went, employees celebrated the demise of this infamous nightmare guest. The concierge staff was particularly relieved when I told them he could no longer torment them. When I returned to the front desk, Carly and Emily tackled me with grateful hugs for taking down their tormentor. Brad just shook his head in amazement. "Do me a favor?" he asked. "If I ever get on your bad side, give me a heads up so I can fix things before you demolish me like that." Later, Mr. Arnold came to the desk, contrite and polite. "Excuse me, my key doesn't seem to be working." I gave him my most insincere smile. "So sorry about that, sir. Let me get you a new one." Aftermath. The next day, I discovered his rewards account had been suspended. A week later, it was gone completely. Wherever he stayed from then on, Mr. Arnold would receive no special treatment or elite privileges, just basic service as a regular guest, if he was lucky and learned to be more respectful. The next one is an entitled people story. I've lived in my house for over 15 years now and never had any issues with my neighbors. We had an unspoken agreement about property lines that we all respected. That was until my elderly neighbor Bob decided to move to a retirement home and sold his place. The new owners were a young couple named Karen and Chad who moved in with their 3 rambunctious kids. Right away, I could tell these folks didn't care too much about common courtesy. They hosted loud parties late into the night and let their kids run wild all over the neighborhood. One Saturday morning, I was drinking my coffee when I looked out the window and noticed Chad hammering away in the backyard. He was building a tall wooden privacy fence on the far end of his property. I didn't think much of it at first. Folks have a right to build a fence on their own land after all. Later that afternoon, when I went to mow my lawn, I noticed that Chad's new fence seemed awfully close to my property line. It was hard to tell for sure just by eyeballing it, but my gut told me something was off. The next day, I went over and knocked on Chad's front door. Karen answered, looking annoyed that I interrupted her reality TV binge. "Hey Karen, I wanted to ask Chad about that new fence he built," I said politely. "It seems to be encroaching onto my yard," Karen scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. Chad measured it perfectly. That fence is squarely on our land." I asked if we could double-check the property line just to be sure, but Karen refused. She slammed the door in my face. Well, that settled that. Over the next few weeks, I became more convinced that the fence was over the line. When I mowed near it, the boards appeared to be on my side of the metal markers I'd buried years ago. I decided to contact a professional surveyor to take exact measurements. The surveyor arrived with his equipment, and after 2 hours of meticulous work confirmed my suspicions. The fence was 3 feet into my yard. Armed with the survey results, I approached Chad and Karen again, asking them to kindly move their fence back onto their own property. Chad laughed in my face, saying, "No way, man. The fence stays. Go build your own if you don't like it." Karen threatened to call the police on me for harassment. These people were unbelievable. Having reached my limit, I hired a lawyer and took them to small claims court for violation of property lines. In court, Chad and Karen were as smug and combative as ever. They continued to insist the fence was properly built on their land, but the judge wasn't having it. My lawyer presented the official survey along with photos clearly showing the fence posts and boards over the line. "Your Honor, my clients have violated local property laws by erecting a fence 3 feet into my client's yard," he said. "We ask that you order them to remove the offending portion of fence and pay damages for reckless behavior." The judge agreed completely and banged his gavel. "I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff. The defendants must relocate their fence back to its legal position within 30 days or accrue daily fines for noncompliance." Chad and Karen were livid at the verdict. Karen called me an idiot and said they shouldn't have to move anything, but the judge admonished them sternly. A month later, I was relieved to see a work crew arrive and dismantle the portion of fence from my property. Chad and Karen glowered at me from their doorway as I stood triumphantly on my cleanly mowed lawn. The justice system prevailed and the encroaching fence was history. My property rights were upheld thanks to the reasonable judge, professional surveyor, and immaculate documentation. In the end, being a conscientious homeowner paid off. Chad and Karen learned that nobody is above the law, no matter how stubborn or belligerent they want to be. It just goes to show, if you stay calm and lean on facts rather than emotions, justice can be served. The next one is a petty revenge story. I live next to a school and I've had parents back up into my driveway to wait for their children. If I'm not going anywhere, I don't mind no harm, no foul. One day I came home to find a woman in my driveway. I got out of my car and asked her to please pull out for a second so I could pull in and then you can back up where you were. She said I will only be a few minutes. I said, "Mom, I live here and I'd like to get into my garage." Because it's a narrow street and parents are now parked on both sides. The street access is now narrow and only one car can get by at a time. I told her that I cannot wait here a few minutes because I'm blocking traffic. "Well, I'll be moving in a bit." I said, "Okay, no you won't be." I then parked perpendicular to her vehicle, blocking my own driveway and her vehicle. As I walked by, I told her I really have to use the bathroom and have stomach cramps. "You are welcome to call the police if you like. I'll be out in a bit." The look on her face after she realized what was happening was priceless. A few minutes later, I could hear honking. A few more minutes later, I hear honking and my doorbell ringing. Only because I saw it was a child ringing on my Ring doorbell, I answered, "I'll be out in a minute. I'm washing my hands." I could hear the little boy screaming to his mother, I assume. He says he's washing his hands. By the time I came out a few more minutes later, all the vehicles and students were gone. I very slowly walked past her car, avoiding eye contact, and got into my car. I adjusted the mirror, moved the car seat forward, then back slowly, started the car, and moved my car forward slowly. All I heard was the tires screeching and the car horn honking as she left. Her windows were rolled up, so I can only assume the little boy got an earful of nice words as she was leaving. My neighbors were wondering what was going on with all the honking. When I explained, they said, "Oh yeah, that's what we kind of figured." The next one is a malicious compliance story. This is a story from my time in my country's army, Greece. After I joined the army for my mandatory 9-month service, I was forcibly given the specialty of the cook. After some surprisingly harsh training, they sent me to an outpost where I had to do 2 daily services, one as a cook and one as an area observer, while everyone else did 1 to 0 services, for about 50 days non-stop. That meant I was on my feet from 6 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. every single day, while getting 3-5 hours of sleep every night. Nobody helped me in any way. I did not have nearly enough time to prepare the food properly. They claimed it was not protocol to help the cook, and nobody cared, so naturally I got extremely tired and pissed off. One day I dared to protest my situation and also report some problems with the kitchen, lack of supplies, and the oven itself, and was told to shut up, stop complaining, and do my job, so I decided to comply with the shut up and don't complain policy. What they didn't know was that I had found a trick to turn the oven on. It looked fine, but the food wouldn't cook at all. The next day I was going to prepare a stuffed vegetables dish for 12 people, tomatoes and peppers stuffed with rice and minced meat. I put it in the oven and waited for 4 hours to not be cooked. I casually served the raw food, which had become mushy and rancid because it was summertime. The look on everyone's face when they tried to eat the first bite was absolutely priceless. They immediately snapped and started freaking out, yelling and screaming in anger like this was a common thing, even though I had never failed a dish before and those arrogant, selfish pricks ate like kings every day. I maliciously smiled and told them that I lacked half of my supplies and the recipe was wildly incomplete while the oven was malfunctioning. Word reached the captain, who also freaked out, but I told him that it was he who commanded me to shut up about the food problems. He said my failure should be reported, and I agreed. I immediately called my unit and reported that I was being mistreated, overworked, sleepless, and ignored for 43 consecutive days, so this resulted to my failure. The next day, I heard the captain was reprimanded severely by our colonel commander for the crappy situation in his outpost. Of course, the next 3 days, I did the exact same thing, and I starved the bastards to insanity. Afterwards, they were begging me to help me out with the food preparations, but I refused since I complied with "it's not protocol to help the cook" policy, which they claimed in the first place, and kept feeding them disgusting, tasteless food under the excuse of a broken oven. They called the unit and cried that I am holding them hostage with the food, and I should be removed. The day I was removed 1 week later was the best day of my life. I haven't regretted anything and 100% would do it again. The next one is an entitled people story. This happened several years ago, but every time I think of this, I just have to shake my head. IF30 at the time was in my 3rd year of coaching a 5-6-year-old girls basketball team. I did not have a kid on the team, but had started with this team while coaching a friend's daughter. She had moved on to a 7-8 grade team, but I agreed to stay on another year. Note that this is a volunteer, unpaid position. I did not live in the team district and had quite a drive to the gym where we met twice a week for practice and/or practice games. It is always interesting dealing with parents, but this year was tougher than the previous years. For example, parents would be late picking their kids up for practice, and of course I had to wait with the kids until they were claimed. One kid stopped coming to the practices and only showed up at games. The parents got mad at me when I told them the kid would not play in the next game unless she came to practice. It seemed like every week there was some kind of issue or complaint. Then the straw that broke the camel's back. At the end of the season, we play in a few tournaments where we would play a couple games on a given day. For the first tournament, I bought donuts for the kids to eat after the games, which they were excited about. After the kids had their fill, I offered the remaining donuts to the parents. As I was gathering up the balls, the medical kit, and the scorebook, I was tapped on the shoulder. It was one of the mothers. "Are you the one who brought the donuts?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. I had not gotten a single thank you from any parent this year for coaching the kids or setting up the tournaments and was ready for some positive feedback. "Next time," she replied with almost contempt, "don't get so many with sprinkles," and she walked away. I am usually quick with a comeback, but I was speechless. The following week did not bring donuts. The following year did not coach. The next one is an entitled parent's story. I work at a secondhand shop. We get a lot of people who come in with kids. Obviously, kids are going to be in public, but more often than not, the kids are rowdy and use our store as a playground. This story is of one such kid and his mother, which happened a few hours ago. EM entitled Mother NL Nice Lady, me, obviously me, a boy, about 10-ish, was running up and down the aisle between our shoes and women's jackets. It's a kind of small aisle and usually the most busy, so I called out, "Hey, no running please." 5 seconds later, he does it again. Thinking maybe he didn't hear me, I said a little louder, "Buddy, no running please, enter our EM." She comes out of seemingly nowhere. We have toppers that sit on top of the racks of clothes, most of which have pillows that make a clear view impossible, which was the case here. EM, while walking into view and yelling at me, "I've got it. Don't you see me talking to him?" I felt my face turn red, embarrassment, and I muttered to no one in particular, "I didn't see her." EM was going on to the man shopping with her about trying to parent someone else's kid. As she reached the register, NL walked up next to me, looking at the clothes I was fixing. You did nothing wrong. He was throwing stuff around back there. I started to tear up at her, reinforcing that I was just doing my job. I grew up in an abusive house where I wasn't really told that I didn't deserve to be yelled at, so it's always refreshing when someone reminds me. EM. If you have something to say OT to me. NL. I was asking them about the color of the day. At this point, I began crying, the beginning stages of a panic attack seizing me as the two began to go back and forth. There were two ladies on the other side of the rack that I was working on who didn't speak English but tried to help by reaching out for my hand and reminding me to breathe. I heard a little bit of their exchange but was a little focused on trying to convince my body that air actually was entering my lungs. NL walked toward the same register as EM, and the little bit I caught roughly goes, NL, they're upset. EM, I'm recording you! I'm recording you! From what my coworker said later, NL told him to call for one of our managers, right A, out here. NL returned to where I was and rubbing my back also tried to remind me to breathe. I was hyperventilating at this point, the worst panic attack I've had thus far. You know the old box TVS? The static that would appear on the glass after turning it off, or just look on YouTube for TV static? That's what my hands felt like. I couldn't feel my legs and was sure that if I moved, I'd have fallen. They let me watch the cameras to explain everything to the managers later, and you can see how red my face was and how panicked my breathing was. My coworker finished ringing up the EM and her family, and they left quickly. He appeared a few feet away from me, trying to see what he could do to help. Our manger did the same, having not been clued in yet. NL to my manager. That lady needs to be banned. I'm not sure what exactly she said after that, cause this was when I discovered that I was so deep in the panic attack that I couldn't even speak. I somehow managed to get out the words, I'm having a panic attack. My coworker ended up helping me walk to the back and to the break room. He sat me in one of the chairs and stayed with me until I could talk. He even went to get my water from my own register. My hands were shaking like a leaf and my teeth started chattering as I tried to slow my breathing and compare stories with him. He went back out on the floor and I took a few minutes. I relayed everything that I caught and that my coworker had told me to, both managers on duty, and the three of us watched the cameras where I gave them a kind of play-by-play. They don't have sound, just video. Everyone, managers, coworkers, and customers agreed that EM was a biznatch and a grunt, and should have been parenting her kid instead of letting him run around like a hooligan. NL ended up leaving without buying anything cause EM made her so mad, which I feel bad about cause I wanted to thank her. If anything else happens, like EM getting banned, I'll update, but I doubt it. But hey, maybe I'll end up on a certain Reddit channel, which would be really cool. The next one is an entitled parents story. Before this, I already made a post about my mom here. Today, something similar happened to me. Kinda, I guess. I'm 18F. Lately, my mom and dad have been having heated arguments over IMO little things. They often fight in front of my siblings, and I'm not gonna lie, it's slowly affecting me. This has been going on for years. Every time they have a fight, I always stay out of their way. Yesterday, my parents had an argument in front of me and my younger sister. I don't know what got into me, but I snapped at them, saying I don't want to hear the same argument every week. I couldn't stand to see them fight anymore, and I felt like I had to speak up. Then, the night after that, I had a fight with my mom because I didn't pick up my brother's call. I had already picked up his call, but then he ended the call. Maybe it was a line problem. She got upset at me before I could explain things, and I was hurt by her words. She didn't listen to my side of the story before getting upset. I went into my room to calm myself down. Today, my mom acted like nothing happened yesterday. Again. While I was eating and watching YouTube, she was in the kitchen. I didn't hear that it was raining outside. Suddenly, she came to me and angrily asked, "Can't you hear the rain outside? The clothes outside are wet now." I didn't say anything to her because I still remembered the fight we had yesterday. Then she got upset, saying, "You are always sensitive about small things. I don't care if you don't want to talk to me, but the shirts outside is already wet. Why don't you pick it up?" At that moment, something crumbled inside me. Maybe I was already feeling drained by all these constant fights. I went outside and picked up the clothes from the clotheslines. I spent about 10 minutes outside trying to calm myself down. I was scared because my dad was in the living room. He probably heard everything, and there was a possibility he would get mad at me too. Then, I went into my room and talked to my younger sister. I told her what happened, and she replied that Mom had argued with Dad earlier before she had a fight with me. I'm tired of my mom taking out her frustrations on me and my younger sister. I know I should talk to her more about this, have a deep conversation about how her actions are hurting us, but I know she wouldn't listen. I've already had that talk with her for the past few years, but she won't listen. It feels like a cycle, and I'm exhausted from constantly trying to make things better. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.